right, it's 1 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone that joined. This is Ask Me Anything with Tristram, and you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right, everybody. Name's Tristram. I've worked in the IT space now for about 15 years. I currently lead a blue team, focusing on the healthcare infrastructure. Um, I'll get in a little bit more about why with healthcare, but I've been dealing now with offensive security related stuff now for the last 3 or 4 years, and I've kind of focused on that to improve my ability with blue teams. Outside of the security stuff, as some of you know, I just had a new child, so we might get interrupted by a crying baby, but hopefully not. But if you do, well, fine. Well, dad might have to go, but that should be all set. And I see that somebody, yeah, you looks like you're trying to get my secret spices here for my grilling. And the other thing I like to do is like barbecue competitions, and I do a lot of smoking. So basically, I'm the guy that posts food a lot. So if you get hungry when you're looking at Discord, it's not my fault, although it probably is.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've seen some awesome stuff you've gotten there, and yeah, definitely after a new blend to see what's going on. um, so yeah, let's just go ahead and get started here. So the first question was, what are some unique challenges that you have faced or are facing in the healthcare sector?
Oh boy, that's a great question, and I'm going to try to limit myself with time because I could speak on that particular question for over an hour. So there's kind of two things. So, well, more than two things. So there's the actual cyber risk side from like bad actors, adversaries, what have you, and there's also the technology side. So one of the things with healthcare is that you have like as IT professionals, we know that we need to be running on the latest and greatest operating systems. We got to keep things patched. We got to keep things going. However, that honestly doesn't ever happen in healthcare. I don't care which hospital you go to. You can assume that somebody has XP running there. Windows 7 is still pretty much in every hospital at this point. So one of the biggest things is that, again, with like, I'll give you an example. There are some multi-million-dollar medical devices out there that still have XP under the hood. Same thing with a lot of point-of-sale systems. So you have these critical pieces of equipment that need to get upgraded in order to facilitate some of these cyber risks that we see, but we can't touch them. The FDA regulations don't allow us to basically we can't even blink at these machines without breaking some type of regulation. And the manufacturers honestly don't do that good of a job with keeping these things with like the latest security practices and what have you. So that's one of the hard things is when you see things in healthcare that you know need to be changed, but you can't because if you install an update, you might do something that could kill a patient. So, for example, we have a medical device that is relatively up to date, but it controls a surgery arm that basically assists with surgery, which to me is kind of scary if you think about a robot doing surgery. However,
Definitely.
if you interact with a particular service that's controlling that arm, you can make that arm move on its own, and that's obviously could kill a patient. So nobody ever thinks about IT and updates, trying to do your due diligence with these medical devices. You could actually kill somebody because you're trying to make it secure. Makes it scary, but that's one of the big things is that seeing these things that are directly interfacing with patients that you're really not allowed to touch. So that can be a little difficult. And then the other side of it, outside of the internal risk, is obviously you get the bad actors. It can be mentally disorienting when you have people that do target healthcare. I mean, even when the pandemic first started, people were still going after hospitals, and it's kind of sad. I mean, it is demoralizing when you have a hospital is trying to treat people who are sick and dying, and at the same time, you need to worry about, okay, are we going to get hit with ransomware? Is somebody going to try to DOS us? I mean, it is a kind of a hard pill to swallow at times, just because it kind of shows you the dark side of cybersecurity a little bit when hospitals get targeted. So it's a little bit of the technical risk and then the mental health aspects as well. It can be difficult.
Definitely, yeah. And just I'm a senior security engineer at a healthcare in the Northeast, so I definitely share all of that. Those wonderful HVAC systems, and if we want to upgrade the X-ray machine, it's millions of dollars that no one has any budget for, and all that fun stuff.
Oh, yes. The budget is always the number one excuse for everything. Oh, we can't do it because it's going to cost us money. It's like, well, you can find the money. You find the money, all these other things.
Find money when the incident happens. And that's usually when companies tend to find all that spare change in the couches.
You are absolutely correct. I mean, if you ever want to, well, it's not funny at all, but some people joke is that if you ever want to boost up your security program, go through a security incident. Not that you want to cause one, but as you said, that's when the money just magically appears, because that's when they finally care, because they're in the limelight.
Definitely. Yeah. All right. So the second question, in your opinion, what are the best and worst aspects of working in security in a healthcare environment?
So one of my favorite things about healthcare, I kind of alluded to it before, is that you have such a wide variety of systems. Everything from insecure operating systems, you got the XPs, the 7s, all these other pieces of third-party software that have varied degrees of implementations. You kind of can get experience with virtually everything related to cybersecurity when you work in healthcare. Again, we think of healthcare systems as very hardened environments because, again, they're interfacing with patients. So keep them safe, the IT side has to be absolutely pristine. It doesn't always happen that way. So one of the things with healthcare is that you have, like, when you're in information security, you're the security guy. You're the person that is there to care about security. However, one of the things is, if you're not the security guy, you are everybody's like number one enemy. Like you're sitting in the roadblock more than anything else, and I'm sure you can understand that side of it too.
Absolutely.
Is people don't realize that we're here to we're advisors to risk. That's our number one thing. And when the organization doesn't want to accept that risk, we're here to mitigate it. And sometimes those mitigations can be unseen. Sometimes you don't even know that there's a control in place. And then, of course, there are those controls and procedures that do impact other people that aren't in security. And the ones that do get very vocal at times are the ones that, honestly, they're a little negligent. I'm sure everybody, there's always that one person that wants to fight every single thing. Even password links. I mean, for our organization, this is going back quite a few years ago now. When we changed those complexity requirements, you thought that we asked them to give us their firstborn child. It's like, no, it's not that big of a deal. Instead of a 6-character password, it's 12 or whatever you want to have. It's not that big of a deal, but people will balk about everything. So things that you think would be a quick project aren't necessarily going to be quick, because you have to be the PR person a little bit and try to win people over. And I believe there's another question kind of talk about that as well, but sometimes you can't win them over, and you have to accept that.
Yeah, definitely. I see in the chat there was. Can you get a little bit closer to your mic? I think they're saying your voice is a little low.
How about that?
Oh, that's great. That's crystal clear. Is that all right? So yeah, I would definitely agree. The risk advising portion is huge, and it's one of the main things that there's always a decision behind what we're asking to do. We're not just trying to put these controls in place because we want stuff to run slower. And the other part I think is interesting is a lot of the IoT in healthcare, especially coming on. Everything's got to be connected to the internet now. That's a whole nother thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we even have staff that wanted to have Amazon Alexas in the surgery room. I mean, they had a legit
The music.
Oh yeah, exactly. You want to be able to say, Alexa, play this song while they're in the middle of surgery. I mean, yeah, I get it. It stands free, as I just set off my Alexa. I'm sorry. So it's just little stuff like that. I mean, there's so many other things that we have to worry about. Okay, she's always listening, so do we need to have a BAA in place? I mean, she's technically recording everything we say, so if you guys mention PHI, are we covered in that sense? And good luck ever having a major vendor like Amazon ever sign a BAA on your behalf. And
yeah, they'll laugh right at you.
Exactly. And there's all those other things, like, again, these folks think that these are these simple little devices, but there's a lot of things you have to consider.
Yep, it's becoming an even wilder world. All right, so the next one was, would you recommend healthcare info security to others? Why or why not? And I think we kind of went over that a little bit with the spread of everything that you get.
Oh, absolutely. You get such a wide variety. You're literally going to be touching everything: databases, web applications, information systems, file servers. endpoint stuff, the people side, phishing, you literally experience a little bit of everything all at the same time. And because there's no two hospitals that are going to be the same. Like for example, a lot of hospitals are still like flat networks. Like there is no network segmentation out there. So if you're in the user VLAN, you can talk to the admin network, stuff like that. I mean, there's sometimes it is overwhelming because there's so much there that it's like like if you're on the red team side of things, you're like, ooh, piece of candy. What can I do now? But it's so large and diverse. But at the same time, if you're on the blue side of stuff, that also gives you direction. It gives you projects to work on. And again, it kind of makes you look better because there's so many opportunities for improvement in healthcare. You won't have any downtime, which could be a bad thing depending on how you want to look at it. But there's always going to be opportunity for growth as you both professionally and just for your security program in general. It will mature because there's so many opportunities.
Absolutely, yeah. It's always something fun to. It gives you the ability to create what I like to call creative solutions to problems that you wouldn't normally face other places.
Exactly.
So the next question: when dealing with a bout of imposter syndrome or burnout, what are your suggestions on how to get out of that funk?
So one of the things that I would recommend for folks is if you're already experiencing burnout, it's a little too late. But one of the things is you need to recognize when you're getting burnt out, and that's something I can talk about for a very long time. So if you're somebody and you find that you're getting yourself upset about things, so for example, I'll just use password complexity as an arbitrary example here. We know as security professionals that we need to have complex passwords. You can't have these summer year derivatives all throughout your network. So when you make a recommendation like that, again, you're the advisor to risk, you're not necessarily the people that's going to say, yes, we're doing this. Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. You're not that person. So when you make recommendations that you feel are generally important, something that needs to get done is going to be good for you, it's going to be good for the organization and the community you serve. But then the decision maker says no because they feel it's going to be too difficult. People are going to get too upset. It's going to be too hard. If I had a nickel every time that a doctor told me that if we do this, we're going to spend too much time logging into a system, or we're going to have too many clicks in between these workflows. It's very upsetting because you are doing what you're there to do. You're advising risk, and they're accepting bad risks. So when that happens, you're going to get upset. You're going to get mad. It's going to upset. It's going to dwell on you. So one of the things that you really need to, this is easier said than done. I mean, even in my tenure within healthcare IT, I wish I kind of did this before, but of course you always learn from your mistakes here. Is that again, you got to learn to let things go. Like if you advise on a risk, you do your work, you show them why it's a risk, you show them how you can fix it, you show them the training that you need to do. You do all your work. They say no. Just remember, you did your job. Document that you advised them. This was the organization's decision. That's important. It's not your decision. It's the organization's choice to accept something or to not go forward with one of your ideas. And then just go to the next thing. Because if you're going to let something like that keep bogging you down, it's going to impact your other work. So again, it is very difficult. And some of these things that would be like to us the easiest things for somebody to do, like screen timeouts is a very common one where you can find if there's an excuse to have screen timeouts, would be one of them where somebody's going to come up with the fun ones. And then just be ready to know that somebody could say no to what you do, and try to let it go when you can, because if you don't, that's when burnout's going to come in, when you find yourself getting angry or upset. And then that's also when imposter syndrome comes in a little bit, because if you're making all these recommendations and they say no, you might be going home or on drive home saying, geez, am I not good at what I'm doing? I mean, am I not selling these right? Are they not good ideas? That's a very real thing. And you have to remember that, for one, it's okay to be upset to agree that they didn't like one of your ideas, because it shows that you care, both personally and as a professional. You wanted this thing to improve. If they didn't accept it, that's fine, but that doesn't mean that you're bad at what you do. It honestly just means that your leaders are bad, not you specifically. Some people might take that as a challenge to try to inform their leaders more often, but depending on the leader and what their decision process is or your change management processes, you might not have another opportunity, which is okay. Or you might have another opportunity when a security incident around that control comes up. Because that's when it's going to come up and you can say, well, I told you guys so. And that's perfectly unacceptable to say. Just tell them, hey, we tried to advise you on this risk. This happened. And I've kind of mentioned it before too, is when incidents happen, it gets people to wake up for a short amount of time, and then they get comfortable and they go back in their funk of accepting risk.
Yep, saying no, and why do we have to do that? The memory is very short for some of those, especially when more clicks and as you, through workflows and all that stuff, it tends to happen. It's definitely that accepting the when they say no and kind of letting go of it was a lesson I had to learn the hard way quite a bit ago, and life has improved since is what I can say.
Absolutely. Just learn to let go, document it, move on, and go to the next challenge.
Yep, and did your best, and there it is. We've got it written when something does happen. All right, so a lot of people feel like they need to prepare or be competent at pen testing before enrolling in or taking Pen 200 OSCP. What are your opinions on that?
That's a good question. So obviously the OSCP and Pen 200 has that reputation for being difficult. So it is difficult. However, I feel the course on its own prepares you for the exam. When I took mine, I had no formal red teaming experience. I just did my own. It was basically just a hobby, hack the box, stuff like that. That's what my formal experience was with pen testing specifically. And then when I actually took the course, and this was not the current version, the one before, I felt that like it prepared me for everything I needed. Obviously you're gonna have those people that are gonna say, "Oh, it's the most difficult course I ever had. I had to take 3 or 4 attempts," which is fine. I'll touch on that here in a second. But it's understanding that it's there's kind of two. Going to backtrack. There's kind of two. When you have people that are very egotistical about these courses, some people are going to say, "Yeah, this is the easiest course I ever had," or some people are going to say, "It's the hardest course I ever had." You got to remember that opinions are based off of experiences. If you're somebody that has a lot of experience with pen testing, yeah, this might be a very easy course. You might fly through it. You might not think it's as difficult. That's okay. But if you're somebody that says this is very difficult, well, that's just because you haven't really necessarily experienced these things before. I mean, we all learn differently, so we all have our different experiences on it. Again, from my own opinion, just from somebody that didn't have that formal writing experience, it does prepare you. A lot of times too, you're going to find after you do Pen 200 and you finish that exam, and I mentioned before, if it takes you a lot of attempts, that is perfectly fine to fail the exam once, twice, 3 or 4 times, as many times. When I'm hiring people, and especially if they have an OffSec cert, like if you pass your exam on the first try, that's great. And if you pass your exam on the 5th try, that's even better because that's telling me so much about your personality. That tells me you're somebody that, for one, that never gives up, and you're somebody that's going to keep trying until you succeed. That doesn't mean that the person that passed on their first try is any less of a good candidate. But when you're somebody that can show, especially in this field, in cybersecurity, you're going to get beat down everywhere, whether it's from adversaries, these risks that are coming out, or again, we talked about the people side a little bit. When you have your own organization that doesn't want to accept these risks that you're advising on, you're going to get beat down. It's going to be very easy to give up or to get burnt out. And I kind of take those same lessons with this exam. Is just understand that it's going to teach you what you need. If you don't understand something, that's perfectly fine. You got to use your online resources. You got to use communities like this one and the other ones that exist out there and help build each other up. So kind of a long-winded explanation for that. But again, I say it does prepare you, but just know that you're not any less of a prospect to pass because you don't understand something or you think it's difficult. We all learn at our own paces. So you got to use the resources that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you put the certification on like a resume, you don't usually put how many times it took you to pass, just that you made it, and that's it doesn't. Yeah, exactly. It shouldn't really matter how many times you take it. The perseverance and the continuous learning, I think, is huge in this field.
Oh, exactly. I mean, even outside of cybersecurity, I mean, I'll use the healthcare analogy here, is you can get your PhD in whatever medical field by getting like a 70 as an average. And they get the same exact degree as those who had a 4.0 GPA through college. It's all the same goal. We all are going to get there differently, but just know that in the end, we're all the same.
Awesome. Yeah. So the next one was, what was the most challenging offensive security certification / course you've taken thus far?
I would definitely say the Web 300 was probably the most difficult one. Mostly because the exam was I didn't know what to expect. I thought the course itself was very well put together. There's a lot of information in there. And I felt the course itself wasn't really difficult, but it was just knowing that that you're going to be given two web applications that much is public, but you don't know, all right, what are the languages of those applications? What type of risks am I going vulnerabilities am I going to have to look for? You don't know. So when you look at all the languages that are presented throughout the course, you can assume that any one of those are going to be within play here. So if you're really good at PHP, but you're really bad at Java, then you're going to want to focus on the one that you're not familiar with. But what about all the other web languages out there? So you kind of have to be somewhat comfortable with all of them because you don't know what you're expecting. So I thought that kind of made the exam jitters pretty real. I mean, that made it, but once you kind of get in there at least once and kind of see, all right, this is what I have to expect. This is what my environment's going to be like. That was probably the hardest part. It's just the unknown. Whereas the other one, especially with OSCP, you kind of know what to expect because you're going through the lab. You can almost assume that your exam's going to be pretty much just a machine you got to hack into, like similarly to what you did throughout the lab.
Mm.
But with the web one, it wasn't exactly like that.
Yeah, that does sound like quite a bit of jitters for that. I'm not sure I'll hit that one, but we'll see.
Well, you'd be surprised. I mean, I didn't. I just did it just for the fun of it, and we do a lot of in-house development, which isn't my favorite thing, but a lot of it is in-house web development stuff. So that's kind of why I did this, just because it would give me an excuse to kind of tear apart our internally developed applications, because a lot of them are just terrible, and we keep funding it for some reason. This is my way of kind of showing them, hey, let me take some formalized training and show you why we shouldn't be doing this stuff.
And here's the cert that says I can.
Exactly.
All right. So if it's not a Tristram secret, what has been the favorite blend of spices you found for any type of meat?
Oh boy, this is hard because it all depends on the type of meat. So one of my favorite things to smoke is I love smoking salmon. So one of my combos that I like to do with this one is I'll mix brown sugar and smoked paprika, and I'll mix it all together. You can use like a sifter to kind of make sure every piece of the sugar and the paprika in there is kind of blended well together. And then I also have granulated maple, and I add just a little bit in there as well. So it gives you the heat and the spices from the smoked paprika, and you get the combination of the sweetness from the sugar and the maple. And when you add that to a smoked salmon, oh, you guys are making me hungry to talk about that.
That sounds amazing. I'm gonna note that down for sure.
But smoked paprika, you can never go wrong with that, no matter what you're cooking.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so the next one was how to start preparing for OSCP as an absolute beginner.
That's a good question. So what I would do is always look at the syllabus for even outside of OffSec, for any course you're looking to take. If they have a syllabus, look at it. And then look at all the topics that they call out and see, do you understand what this topic is generally talking about? So let's say enumerating FTP. Let's say that's like a topic on the syllabus. If you don't know what FTP is, okay, well then you should note that somewhere, saying, all right, I got to brush up on what FTP is. How does it work? What are the protocols involved? What's the authentication like? Dig into those, but go through the syllabus first and just notate the topics that you're not super comfortable with. I'm still very confident in saying that the course prepares you for everything, even if you go into it knowing nothing. But you get a little bit more of your confidence back if you at least go through the syllabus and brush up on the things that you don't know immediately.
Yeah, I would agree. I personally did a decent amount of try hack me before I started Pen 200, and I felt like that helped me at least a little bit. Get a decent foundation, just like going through that and getting my feet wet with it.
Absolutely, and I did the same thing with Hack the Box when I first started. That was more my hobby, was just tinkering around on there. I played on that a little more than I probably needed to when I was prepping for it, but between TryHackMe and HCB, all those platforms, just something to get your hands wet on a topic that you're not familiar with is going to help you.
Yeah, definitely. So the next one was, what are some of the best ways to gain a good networking of InfoSec people?
That's a good question. So a lot of that is just find the communities. Again, this is also a good community. You have a lot of people on this server. You guys have over 20K last time I checked. Find communities like this. Find communities where people talk. So the one way that you can community wrong is if you join a community and you don't participate. I mean, it is okay to be shy, especially in this field. A lot of people are a lot of us are introverts where you're not like a social butterfly, which is okay. It takes people time to get out of your shells. But like spark a conversation with somebody, ask them how their day's going, just get to know people. If somebody has an issue, try to help them. If you have an issue with something, ask. Because the more you talk with people, you build these relationships with folks, and you show people that you're here to help build others up, they'll also try to help build you up for whenever you need help as well. So find those communities and get involved, stay active. Because when you are in a community and you don't participate with the other folks, you're gonna feel like it's not gonna be helpful, a good fit for you because you're not really doing anything. You're just stagnant. But again, if you participate with folks and you engage with others, you're gonna find that communities like this one are gonna be very helpful and help you succeed.
Yeah, and also with the participation in places like here in the OffSec Discord and the InfoSec prep one, like the being able to participate and then teach it once you understand it is another great part of, I think, this whole being able to collaborate like this.
Absolutely.
All right, so the next one was, how important are blue team skills for someone working on the offensive side or vice versa?
So for me, the blue side of the house comes in time. A lot of it too is if you have a great mentor, so if you're working on a team and you have somebody who is a senior staff and they're willing to teach you, that is amazing. So with me, it's harder to learn blue teaming because there's not as many resources out there as there is for pen testing. However, if you're like for myself, I'm focused on the blue side of the house. When you learn pen testing or red teaming stuff, it makes you so much better at blue teaming for a variety of reasons. For one, it's going to help you understand different entry points for these vulnerable scenarios that you may not have necessarily known about because you haven't experienced it. The other thing too is like if you're dealing with incident response. So let's say you get dropped into a situation where you have a server that's been hacked and you see some payloads that are just let's say you have Cobalt Strike on them. A lot of people don't know what that is. But if you are familiar with it, because you've used it with some various red team exercises, you're going to know, okay, somebody probably got a connection to this server. I should probably start looking at the network logs or the web logs to see where else have they gone, where are they talking to. It helps you know where to look next when you when you know how the hacker thinks, because you might also have a hacker mindset. It's going to help you piece everything together. Otherwise, with a lot of these incidents, especially if they're really good at hiding their tracks, they can be intimidating because you might not know where to go. So by again getting that red team training, it's going to help you get that experience.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The having the context when you're dropped into a situation like that and just being able to kind of put that hat on is huge, and it's definitely been helpful for, I'm sure, incident response and all that stuff for sure. All right, so the next one was, what are some visible signs that you're mentally burnt out due to work?
Touched on that a little bit, but I definitely want to emphasize it again. If you find that you're getting upset more, that's a sign that you're getting burnt out. Again, something you recommend was rejected. Or even you have that one coworker that every time they hear your name, they're like, "Oh, Tristram, I don't want to deal with that guy. Every time I talk to him, he takes something away from me." That can be a little demoralizing a little bit because you don't want to be seen as public enemy number one. You're just here to help the organization, help the community, and in a way help them. But when you notice that, again, you're getting upset with these situations, especially if you're getting mad. If you're getting mad, that's when you need to learn to kind of back off a little bit or just take a break. And just remember that you're an advisor to risk, and you're advising to the people who are ultimately responsible for the organization. If you advise something to them, they agree with you and they want to mitigate the risk, great. You did your job. Move forward and go fix it. But if they decide to accept the risk, just let it go. Document it, that way you have a record of it saying that, hey, this is a known risk. The organization accepted it because of this. So again, if an incident happens because of that risk, you can say, well, we advised you guys on this date. Or even go back to it after a certain amount of time. Go back the next quarter or the next time you meet with that person. Like if you have like a annual meeting with your chief, or every 3 months or so, just bring it up, saying, "Hey, these are a list of all the accepted risks that we have. Do you feel any differently about any of these?" Just kind of bring it up. Don't harass them with it, but just kind of mention it. Because again, when we advise risk on something, it's because we care. And it's hard to kind of let go, and it's hard for me to tell people to let go when they decide to accept the risk, because we just want to see it go away. But just know that if you're getting upset or you're mad because they didn't want to mitigate it, just understand that you're there to advise the risk. They're there to make the decision whether or not they're going to remediate it.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. All right, so the next one was for someone starting their career in cybersecurity as a security analyst, which side gives more advantage, red team or blue team?
So I feel blue team, so I'm obviously a little bit biased. So the reason why I say blue team, if you're a red teamer, you're doing just red teaming. Yes, pretty much all you're going to be hacking the machines. But if you're on the blue side of things, not only are you defending these systems, but chances are you're going to have an opportunity to do red teaming stuff. Like for the team that I lead, we obviously have our blue team ops, but we also work in red team related exercises pretty much every day. Just so when we do have those downtimes, we're always doing something. So even little recon operations, like if you're trying to do host discovery for your range of public IPs, just making sure that all the IPs that are saying they're active, you have them documented, and all the ports that are open on those devices are the same ports that you have documented. Just little things like that they're still red team exercises, but that's stuff that you can take advantage of while you're on a blue team, because you're going to have that availability to do that. Whereas again, with a red team, you're kind of focused on just one side of the house.
Yeah, and I think I've heard Al Hazred from InfoSec Prep mention, blue teaming, you get to see the misconfigurations that tend to be made. You get to see the inner workings of stuff like AD and stuff where, somebody that's dedicated red teamer their entire time may not have ever really dealt with or seen why an organization would set something up a certain way.
That's a great point. And when you see those misconfigurations on the other side of the house, especially if there's something that you see very frequently, it gives you something to kind of put in your notebook on the back of your mind saying, hey, if I run into a scenario like this, try this out, because of what you've seen on the back end.
Definitely. All right, so the next one was, is it necessary to know coding to be a good red teamer / pen tester?
It helps. I don't think I've ever met anybody that's a full-time pen tester that doesn't have some coding experiences. It doesn't mean they can't be successful, but you're going to find that if, like, for example, like PowerShell and Python are the two languages that I hold near and dear because that's all I do. It makes things a lot easier if you know stuff like that, because you can automate a lot of those redundant tasks that you just don't want to do manually anymore. It doesn't mean that you can't, because there are a lot of like product suites out there that automate a lot of tasks for you. Like Metasploit is one of those, obviously, because it automates all these exploits for you. But all the other things outside of Metasploit, if you know how to automate them, whether it's through PowerShell, Bash, or Python, it's going to make things easier. So it's one of those things that I would always recommend folks to at least try to get your feet wet a little bit. Bash is a good one to learn, to at least have a basic understanding of on the Linux side. PowerShell is at this point is almost like a must know. I'm not going to have some resources I can share for that for folks that aren't too, because I've noticed that not everybody's comfortable with PowerShell, and that's something that's very good to know. And then if you want to do something a little bit more advanced on the Linux side, I'm a little bit partial, or Windows, I guess. I'm a little bit biased when it comes to Python. But definitely at least get one advanced scripting language. Start to at least get familiarize yourself with it a little bit.
Yeah, I'd have to plus one the PowerShell. That has helped me greatly in automating, anything from pulling logs to, going through active sync logs or anything like that. It's huge. And then seeing what I've been applying it in the Pen 200 labs is just made it a lot easier.
Oh, absolutely. And especially if you're in a blue team scenario where you don't have the budget for all these cool sim tools, you can do a lot with PowerShell. Like one of the things that I have is I have a few honeypots that I have dispersed around my network. And one of them, and I have a PowerShell script that digests some of the web logs on some of those honeypots to kind of see, all right, is anybody programming the web server that's on this? Who's talking to you? Who's grabbed this file? And being able to automate a lot of those tasks, that way you don't have to. I mean, you can save yourself a little bit of money. Obviously, you want a dedicated sim, but you'd be surprised on the things you can come up with if you know how to automate these things.
Yeah, or see who's configured a computer wrong that's reaching out to that server all the time, and then to fix that.
And who the hell deployed IPv6 on your network when it's turned off?
Yeah. All right. So, is there ever an NDA or contract you've refused to sign? I don't know if that's maybe somebody's personal question.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. However, I can answer this. So I have refused an NDA for an org. So I don't know if I can actually. I can generalize it. So we have a solution that we use for vendor remote access that pretty much within our contract with this vendor, we tell them that they demand that we provide them the remote access solution. And part of our agreement is they basically agree to use whatever solution we have. That's all fine. It's pretty common. You see that everywhere. However, once they started using this solution, they noticed that, it's kind of funny because this particular solution records everything they do. And it's very obvious that records because there's a huge banner across the screen that says, hey, you're being recorded. And then they basically demanded that we signed. Actually, it was a whole new contract with a whole bunch of other stipulations saying how we should configure that solution. And it's like, no, we're not going to do that. They're trying to tell us, hey, we have to provide a remote access solution. We manage it. We control it. You guys use it. But then they came around and wanted to do a whole another contract that actually had a lot of other sketchy items in it. Always read the contracts. That's another lesson from this. Read everything, especially if you're not the one signing it. If at least look at it through the lens of information security. If there's a line item on that contract that looks weird, just let somebody know. So they had a lot of sketchy things on that contract that they wanted to do, and we're pretty much like, yeah, no, we refuse to sign this, and they continued to use the solution anyways because they knew that they didn't really have a legal leg to stand on because we were already in contract with them. So it was pretty sketch that they tried to do that, but in that particular scenario, we did refuse to sign something.
Yeah, going through that seems like it hits a little close to home with some of these, the wonderful medical device vendors. Some of those are always fun to navigate.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we actually have one piece of medical device that we had to sign an NDA for. I can't say who the company is, but basically there's a line item that says that we won't tell people what's under the hood for it, for that particular solution. It's like, why would they put something like that on it? And then when they actually saw what was under the hood, it's like, oh, that's why.
That's why.
So assume whatever bad configuration you can think of, this is what's probably here. And unfortunately, this particular vendor is a market leader in that space, and it's for a solution that we need. And it's like, oh, great.
Yeah, and with a lot of those, like the IoT stuff, like those, like Ripple 11 and all that, all those that were coming out for those TCP/IP stacks. I mean, that hits healthcare so hard all the time. All of those vulnerabilities that come out like that. All right. So, what does a typical day look like for you? What about an ideal day?
Good question. So, generally speaking, knock on wood, we have our network that I serve is pretty locked down, so there's really not much that happens. So I have basically a list of things for my team and myself to do, and that's one of the things that I wish more leaders would do, particularly blue teams, is that every single person on your team should be able, to a degree, perform the same task as anybody else. That way, if somebody leaves, they're not taking all their knowledge on how to do something with them, or if somebody needs to be focused on something else, the same tasks are getting done. And same thing with the leaders or the managers in those spaces. They should also be getting their hands dirty. Nothing like bugs me more to see a leader or a manager with extremely clean hands. Like that's not my style. That's not how I do these things. I'm very hands on. So my typical day is pretty much I log in and I kind of see we have a few sims involved in our implementation. I kind of see, are there any alerts that are kind of like expected noisy alerts, stuff that I don't have to really worry about because it's just noise. And if there's anything that looks kind of suspicious or something I should probably look into, I'll dig into it there. But again, knock on wood, things have been relatively quiet. And then outside of like the external threat type of deal, we have obviously you have to serve your employees internally. So we help with regular day-to-day IT tickets, what have you. I can't get to. I actually had a laugh because I had one person that said they couldn't get to Discord, and I said, "Oh, we don't allow Discord on our network," as I was full disclosure there, but it was on a different network, so too bad. This stuff like that. So in an ideal day, nothing's really happening. We're just getting project work done. Like we're working on like a new control we're trying to implement, hardening things we have, and finding more different ways to have our team do red team operations during downtime. I'll let them pick from a list of environments, and I'll say, hey, try to hack it, because why not? Let them learn. So we always have some type of internally directed hacking going on, so that way folks can, again, get that experience and potentially find some holes that we can patch.
Nice. That sounds awesome. All right. So the next one was, what's next for you that excites you?
Oh boy. Well, you guys were talking about food, so I'm thinking about the burgers that I'm going to be grilling here in a little bit. Well, right now I'm starting up Pen 300 here. In about
nice.
Not a week, about a month. So that's gonna be a fun one. Obviously with my son being born here, kind of seeing him and just when you have for those that if you don't have children, when you do have your first child, even your second or third, everything changes because you want immediately you're telling yourself while you're holding the child in your hands, you're like, I want to make this world better for you. So what better way to make the world better for others in our field is just to pursue professional development. I mean, I was going to take more courses anyways, but now I really want to continue what I'm doing now even more. You always want to leave the world better when you're gone than when it was when you were here. So always strive to make everything better. And that's part of why I've always lived by the motto, like, be the resource you always wish you had. Because a lot of folks in this space don't have people who are willing to share knowledge. I know some of the folks that are listening right now know a little bit about my backstory. But when I was starting out in IT, I was 16, and the people that I worked for were the biggest jerks that I have ever worked with. And I'm not talking about this because a lot of it was a little bit of age discrimination. Nobody, I'll touch on this a little bit. Nobody likes it when somebody younger comes into the office and starts doing a similar job as you. I don't care how comfortable you are with your job, whether you're nice or a mean person, it's going to upset you one way or another. So how you can either decide to help that person grow with your own knowledge, or you can make their life a living hell to get them to leave, so your security blanket isn't being tugged on a little bit. So when I was starting off, like, I didn't have anybody that was willing to teach because they're all so intimidated, and that's their own fault. So trying to be, for at least for myself, is try to get myself involved as much as I can, learning all the things that I can, and then sharing what I've learned with others just to help to make things better for people. So for me, it's just learning something new that I can share with others, because what better way of building up your community than teaching everybody? In one way or another, cybersecurity is one of those fields, whether you're in healthcare, banking, any other sector, we're all working on the same exact goal. We're all the same team. We're trying to make the lives for the bad guys harder. So by becoming a resource for each other, everybody all together, we're going to make our jobs easier, and we're going to empower each other. So learning something new is just from that I can share. It's something that always gets me excited.
Yeah, wise words, and yeah, that continuous learning is definitely what I've preached to a bunch of the people on my team as well. All right, so what's worst? What's worked best for you in terms of stress relief, and what do you recommend to others to find that thing that works for them?
A good question. So part of it is I like to barbecue and you like to smoke. I talked about it a little bit. So you have to find something that's not computer related. Something that when you're at that point where it's like, I don't even want to look at my email because I know I got that one email from that one guy that I don't want to read because I know it's going to trigger me. So if you can have some type of escape, like I like to call those coworkers potatoes. So whenever people hear me say, yeah, I had to work with a potato at work today, they know I'm dealing with somebody that I just like. So that's my trade secret. So if I ever call you a potato, I am sorry, but I'm just kidding. I'll never call anybody here a potato. But we all have that one person that just triggers us, and we go home and we're pissed or we're upset. So the best way to kind of help with that is to find something completely unrelated to what has you upset and go do. For me, I like my fire pit. I like cooking. I like smoking and grilling, all that stuff. So if you can do something, find something like that, that's going to be the best stress relief. Something where you can just completely switch your brain off from whatever you're working on.
Yeah, I would agree. Getting away from the screen is definitely helpful. All right, so what's the biggest vulnerability you see companies struggle with that gets exploited the most in pen tests?
Boy, so that is a great question. So I'm going to kind of separate this from external pen tests and internal pen tests. From what I've seen in myself, externally, a lot of orgs do very well. I mean, if you go on a Shodan, you can do a search for who has RDP open and stuff like that. Stuff that we would think are quick fails, even though majority of those are honeypots. Like stuff like that doesn't. I haven't found those like ridiculous implementations externally, because realistically, if you have something that has a very stupid implementation like that, like for example, like those hosts that say they have SMB open to the internet, chances are that's not really real. If it is, don't touch it because it's probably a honeypot or is the Fed, so you don't want to get yourself in trouble. So at least externally, I feel that the most common thing is more regulatory, but it's like TLS configurations, people that have poor cipher suites, stuff like that. You're gonna find that a lot because again, external side of things are better than what you would think. But on the inside, internal pen test, oh, that could go so many different places because it can be overwhelming. One thing that I have, at least for myself, that I put a little bit extra attention to is SMB shares, which might seem like a very simple thing, but when you look at, or like we as security practitioners know what is a safe implementation, what is a safe way to present a share. And by default, when you do a share, it's available by the everybody group with read access, unless you decide to give it full access. We know that's stupid. We know that's wrong. But if you're not the person that's responsible for security, all you care about is getting your job done as soon as you can in the smallest amount of time. So that leads to very insecure implementations. And that's especially true even in healthcare. Like I couldn't even like fathom like how many times I've found shares at house PHI that were just wide open. It's like, why is this here? Like, why? Like, this isn't a good idea at all. Like, we even have people that try to share out the system drive on their server or even workstation at times. And you're just dumbfounded by, it's like, why are you even doing that? Do I even need to have this conversation with you? Like, as an IT professional, you should know what's right and what's wrong. But little things like that, things that you think, like, that's why a lot of these CTF-ish like machines that you see, people are like, oh, you're never going to see something like that. Oh, that's too ridiculous. Like, you'd be very surprised. Poor configurations or just stupid or lazy admins, if you will. These things happen everywhere. Like, everything that you wouldn't do, you can assume that you're going to see it. So, especially for SMB shares, because those are usually a wealth of information, especially if you know how to find them quickly.
Everyone can access it. What's the problem?
Oh, my favorite excuse. Oh my god, if I had a nickel every time somebody says this, and this is only a problem if there's a hacker on the network. Like, that is one of my that's one excuse that'll just trigger me every single time. Like, I don't care if somebody has to get on the network to exploit this, because if they get on the network and they exploit this, well, they exploited it. It's a problem, especially if it's regulatory. So if you don't want to get the OSCR involved in these things. I mean, if you're somebody and you use that as an excuse, especially if you're in cybersecurity, it's like, oh, it's not bad unless there's somebody on the network. It's like, no, too bad. You prepare for the worst, and you assume the worst and prepare for the best case scenario. So if it's something that looks wrong and needs to be fixed, get it fixed.
Yeah, and I'd like to also support the going through a pen test and doing an assumed breach scenario. I think that kind of tends to open a lot of people's eyes as well.
Absolutely, I agree.
All right, so next one. How do you overcome the intermediate phase of I know all theory, but I'm not good at practice phase?
That's another good question. So a lot of that, I feel, comes with experience. I mean, when you initially start, you're all theory until you get that hands-on experience. You're always learning. So I feel the majority of your career is going to be theory, because you're not going to be able to touch every aspect of an information system throughout your tenure. Maybe after 30, 40 years, maybe. But the problem is that our field is changing every day. New technology is coming out every day. Protocols are getting deprecated. Protocols are coming in to replace them. You're always going to have a mix of both. So I honestly feel that, at least for what I do, probably 80% of my job is honestly theory, and the 20% is practice, because so much of what we do is research, and research is all theory. And obviously, you can take what you're learning into practice, but I don't think the theory phase is ever going to go away.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I think a lot of that is the research that ends up in rabbit holes that you never ended up going down. Like, oh, that does look interesting.
Exactly.
All right, so the next one was, with the capabilities of current perimeter security and monitoring tools, how challenging is it to perform black box pen testing?
So one of the things that not everybody thinks about when it comes to the security monitoring tools is you also have to assume that they're being responded to appropriately. So if you have an organization that has a relatively green or a very small security team, like we'll talk about IPS then, sensors. Yeah, it might be alerting on things. Like, let's say somebody tries to scan a web server and you trigger off the IPS unit. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're following up on it, especially if you do stuff in the middle of the day, in the middle of the night when somebody's probably sleeping. The chances of, not every organization is going to have some type of 24/7 response. So a lot of people think that when they say they have these monitoring and security tools that you're not going to get through. I wouldn't worry about that until you get busted, because just because they have it there doesn't mean that it's one configured correctly, they're responding appropriately, or that it's even working. So there's been a lot of times where I was on a penetration test with a client about 2 weeks ago. They had pretty much that same exact scenario. They had a web application firewall in front of a particular web application, and they were like, "Oh yeah, nothing's going to get through. It's working just fine." And the night of my pen test, they apparently turned it off to test something, and they never turned it back on. So it's like, you guys said you had a WAF in front of this, but there was had quite a few findings that I got to provide to you. It's like, what's going on here? And then that was it was on a Zoom call, and I could see everybody's face, including their chief. And the look on the chief's face and the texts that were involved in that particular implementation, oh my God, I felt bad. It's like, I'm not trying to make you look bad here. I'm just relaying the results here. But you said you had something, and it clearly wasn't turned on.
Yeah, it's not me staring daggers at you.
Exactly. And that's the other thing too, is if you're on a blue team, so one of the things that I do, and I will always welcome, is have a third-party pen test. Like, I could care less if I have somebody, well, I do care if somebody comes and they're actually able to hack us, that's one thing. But to get a different opinion from somebody is important, because I feel like I have a very good understanding of my network and what the problems are. But I could always miss something. So when you have a different perspective come in and do a pen test, they could find something or exploit something in a way that you didn't know was exploited. So that's good. It's going to help you grow. It's going to help you patch that hole. But if you hire somebody like a third party, don't go into the assessment with an EO and tell people, oh yeah, we got this on and that's on. You're not going to be able to do anything. Mum's the word. Like, don't go into the assessment being a dick, because if that person does find something, you're going to have a moment like what I had, and it's be like, yeah, we were able to do all these things, even though you said you were doing all these things. So don't go into an assessment like that with an inflated ego, because it's going to make you look really bad, and you're going to hurt that relationship with that vendor.
Yeah, definitely. And having those findings from a third party, and if they manage to, maybe gel or be in the same vein as some of the risks you've brought up previously that were maybe accepted, and they're kind of brought to the forefront that from someone else who was testing you, then that kind of gives, I think, a bit more ammo to that argument.
Absolutely.
All right. So, and the other part about the security monitoring, having those tuned as well as having people that actually respond to them, or maybe that somebody's coming at them, in the middle of the day when traffic's high, and you may not notice it in the bunch of logs that are generated. I think there's definitely different ways, like you said, around that.
Absolutely.
So the next one was, how do you keep yourself updated in the latest exploits, attacks, vulnerabilities, etc.?
Oh, good question. So the biggest thing is to stay active in communities like this one. Again, with 20.4K thousand people are going to talk. So if you're part of a very active community, like, read the conversations that are going to happen. Like, if something comes out that's in the wild that you may not have seen yourself, chances are they're going to talk about it on Discord. So if you stay active in this community, they're going to help bring these things to light. So for me, that's the biggest thing that I like to use, is I like to just be part of these communities that are just so active. So if something does come out and I miss like that US third alert or what have you, I know that somebody one way or another is going to talk about it. So if you just stay active in these communities, they're going to help you stay informed.
Yeah, and definitely, like, maybe you don't know too much about, a Drupal exploit that came out, but you have it in your environment, and somebody in the community does know the inner workings of it. They may be able to give you a bit more guidance on it and be able to speak, intelligently to it.
Absolutely.
So have you ever met or known anyone who is white hat by day and black hat by night? And have you ever used your knowledge skills maliciously? And I don't think you have to answer the second part.
Well, that's okay. So I'll just face it with, I've never done anything illegal. I don't even have a parking ticket. I mean, I'm in the middle of nowhere next to a lake, and I'm surrounded by mountains, so there's really little things that I can do wrong. But when it comes to like doing stuff maliciously, like, obviously, that's the other thing too with this field. There's a lot of ego. Everybody wants to go into a huge board and say, I'm the biggest baddest hacker in the room. But they always say that from like the malicious side of things. Or even those people that are like, oh, you pay me $50, I can get you this person's Facebook account. Those are just tools. Just ignore them. So if you have to go out in public and say, I'm the biggest baddest hacker, shut up and sit down. Just go away. So if you have somebody like that and they're just toxic, just ignore them. That's pretty much all they are. They're just toxic. They're just jokes. However, so I have had some people that would just say, again, like they're white hat during the day and black hat at night. I personally haven't seen that. There's most of the people that I have seen are relatively have the best intentions in the back of their mind. But again, with anybody that does anything illegal, I typically don't associate myself with those folks. I don't got time for that.
Yeah, and you can usually, keep it legal by doing stuff like HackerOne and BugCrowd and get paid for it. So, do you need to go in black hat when you get paid for it, doing what you know?
Exactly.
All right. So, the next one was, what combination of tools, in your perspective, starting from scanning to exploitation, best works in a successful pen test?
That's a good question. So I would say the tools that you can build yourself. I'm going to do a shameless plug here. So one of the things that I posted not too long ago was basically a guide about how to incorporate Python and everything related to Nmap. So one of the things that's difficult with a lot of these commercial tools is they do so much, and sometimes it's very hard. It's very intimidating to read the output of these. However, if you can build yourself a tool or a tool set that accomplishes specific tasks, you're going to understand better, or what is this tool saying? Because let's say it spits out some vulnerability that it found. Chances are you're going to have a better understanding about why it found a vulnerability and how it can be exploited because you wrote it yourself, because you started it from the ground up. So I don't really think there's a particular tool that can help you that's all encompassing that can do that for you. Over time you will. But I would definitely say the tools that you can try to learn to build yourself or at least customize yourself are going to help you be a little bit more successful.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that was all good points there. I just put your GitHub and your website in the stage chat as well.
Cool.
All right, so the next one was, how does development skills or programming language help being a successful pen tester? Which programming language is most needed in pen tests?
So so you're going to be, I wouldn't say so development. So I think of development and scripting are kind of two different things here. So we talked about it before, like definitely if you're doing stuff with Windows, learn PowerShell. So no matter what you do in red teaming, you're going to get involved with Windows. So you should be very comfortable with PowerShell. So I would definitely say focus on that because again, that's something that not a lot of people are comfortable with. Yeah, they might know a command out here and there, but can they write a full-fledged PowerShell script that does a whole bunch of object manipulation? Probably not. And there's a lot of different ways that you can interact with the Windows operating system through PowerShell that you may not know. So I would say that's definitely like something that's very well needed. And because chances are you're going to experience Windows more than you will in a Linux environment and within various environments you go through. And then again, I'm biased, but obviously I think Python is useful, but probably Bash would be a little bit more better for you before you dig into Python. So I would at least start with Bash and PowerShell to start with.
All right. And I want to be respectful of your time. We have a couple more questions. Are you good to do those, or did you have a hard out?
So I can do a couple more questions.
Okay. All right. So, what's the best way to break into a pen testing red team career without any official experience? Right now, my only experience has been completing CTFs in my free time.
So pretty much do what you're doing right now. If you're doing CTFs, I mean, you're getting your hands-on experience. You're learning different tools. You're getting different exposures to different scenarios, which is great. So when you are ready to start looking for jobs, if you don't have any certs, that they do help get you that interview. But if you don't have the certs or you can't afford them, one of the things that I like to tell people is try to look for internships or try to look for job shadows because those are going to help you get that job experience and maybe you could job shadow. That's actually how I got started where I am now. Is when I was 16, I started off with a job shadow within this organization, and that led to me get that on-hand experience. So when the position did open up later that summer, I was able to get it because I worked for free with that job shadow. So just doing things. So sometimes you just have to bite the bullet a little bit and give up some time for free, knowing that it could lead into a foot in the door. But I think what you're doing for right now is probably the best thing because you're getting that exposure.
Yeah, and I think I've heard people mention that putting your hack the box rank on under an experience in your resume or something like that. People do tend to look at that in these kind of pen testing red team organizations to see that you're not only doing it but you're continuously learning with it.
Exactly.
All right, next one. What's the vuln machines you recommend to train before buying the course? I'm assuming they're talking about Pen 200.
So what I'll do is just look at TJ Null's list. I can post a link
Yep.
Later. That'd be the best one to go to. That gives you a good variety of things to go to.
Yeah, I'd definitely echo that. I think it may be pinned around here somewhere, but yeah, we can definitely post it again. All right, and then the last one was: is it beneficial to go for OSCP who are not into pen testing, but is it specifically required to get into the pen testing field?
It helps. At this point, I think most folks that hire pen testers are going to look for OSCP. Again, I mentioned before that pen testing may be a better blue teamer. So I think if you were to do something like that, it would definitely make you better. So I would definitely recommend it regardless of which field in security you go to.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what drew me to it as well, is just getting that well-rounded knowledge.
Oh, and I'm not sure how many questions you have, but after we're done this, I'm definitely going to go through. If there is a channel with the questions. I can go through and I can respond to everybody off the air as well.
Okay, yeah. Actually, that was the last question. So let me look and see if there was anything posted in the channel. There was one. Any recommendations for those used who are doing self-study for OSCP, not a beginner but novice pen tester?
Definitely I would definitely say look, either go through the proving grounds, try Hack Me or Hack the Box. They're going to get you, and that's the biggest thing. Because when you're starting off as a novice, or even if you have some relative experience, you're always going to have that moment of shock when you have a machine in front of you. You got Callie. It's like, oh my god, what do I do? There's so many things I could do. I don't even know where to start. Once you can start getting some of that initial exposure and start build up your confidence, you'll be able to know, okay, I need to start with this. Let's go ahead and do this task. That didn't work. Go to the next thing. The more hands-on experience you give you, you're not going to have that deer in the headlights look.
Yeah, and especially doing, I think Proving Grounds has been a great addition that they've put out, and when you first hit some of those Nmap scans of machines with a bunch of ports open, it's a little daunting. So I think being able to triage and go through all that is definitely, having seen it before is better than, like you said, deer in the headlights seeing it for the first time. All right, so I think that's it. Again, I want to thank you for your time, Tristram, and everyone that joined. If you want to hang out in the stage chat, if anybody has any extra questions, just post them in there. And thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to come and listen to me talk. I mean, I'm always an available resource. If you ever want to chat or just want to ask some general questions, feel free to reach out. I'm definitely going to stick around. I'm just going to go grill some burgers real quick, but I'm going to go back and I'll answer any questions that I missed.
Yeah, I got to go grab some salmon and get that going.
When you do that, send me a picture of how it looks when you're done.
Oh, I will. All right. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.